But what we're also saying, because we live in an undeterministic reality, is that we can't make a prediction or a strictly certain prediction about what's going to happen with this final domino. We can't say with certainty that this mechanism doesn't exist. It may be the case that information within the universe appears at random, and then if we do this infinitely across the entire universe, but we just take every bit of information or every set of information, every piece of information that is arriving randomly or without precursor into our universe, there is still some, we can just say like an array or a matrix of information that is describing how these objects are appearing, when and where and how. All right, I'm going to talk about determinism and why I think that we exist in a completely deterministic reality and there is no such thing as non-deterministic outcomes. Now, I think from a human perspective, from the context of what we can understand, there are non-deterministic effects. So for example, the obvious one would be quantum mechanics. It appears to have percentage outcomes or a set of unpredictability that is baked in to how the function operates. So how the system of quantum mechanics operates. In this example, let's talk most precisely about what determinism is and then why I think it's the case. So if we have a system of, say, dominoes, if we live in a deterministic reality, then we would say that we can know with a certain perspective about this, in which we have all the information, we can know with certainty, strict certainty, that this domino is going to fall. The easiest way to prove that this would be true, given the hypothetical is true in that we have all the information, is to think of the alternative. So let's think about a situation where we have a bunch of dominoes and there's some uncertainty about whether this other domino is not going to fall. But let's remember, we're in a hypothetical where we have all of the information about the system. That is to say, we have every individual bit about what is going to happen as the system functions and propagates forward. But what we're also saying, because we live in an undeterministic reality, is that we can't make a prediction or a strictly certain prediction about what's going to happen with this final domino. Now, I think that you might have heard the contradiction, right? So we're in a hypothetical where we have all of the information about the system, which means we have all of the information about how the system operates, about how it propagates, about how it changes, and about how as time or space is differing or changing throughout the system, particular sets of information are permutating through the space or the time, right? In an undeterministic reality, even within the perspective of having infinite knowledge about the system, there is an unpredictability of the outcome of the system, right? So we have all of the information, but there is some information that we don't have, right? So there's a contradiction here. Again, I don't disagree that from the human context, from the context of a brain, the reality that we observe and experience appears to be undeterministic, especially when we regard quantum mechanics. The universe contains everything inside of it, correct? And everything inside of it, therefore, is what we describe as information. And so if the universe is containing everything inside of it, or all of the information, it has all of the information, but then there is information that appears in the universe that it didn't have previous access to. What mechanism allows such a thing to exist? We can't say with certainty that this mechanism doesn't exist. It may be the case that information within the universe appears at random, right? So let's say we have the universe and we think of it with time. So we have some stretching of time, or we could just think of it as some space, whichever way we want to think about it, that's stretched out across here. And we're observing bits of information or some set of information appearing inside of our reality in a way that is unpredictable, even with all of the information. So that is to say that information is appearing in the context of our universe outside of anything that we could have determined previously in our spatial or time-based dimension that we're kind of moving through as we perceive things, right? And what I would posit is that as if we look at this not as time passing or as moving through a spatial dimension, but if we look at the totality of this system as a system, what we would find necessarily is that there is some distribution of this random information throughout the universe that's appearing in some particular way that we can then define through some incredibly complicated mathematical function, but we can still define through some mathematical function that implies that there is some information about how that information is appearing randomly inside of our universe, right? So what we've kind of done is we've moved from understanding that in order to have a system in which we have all the information present and we're not able to predict the outcome of the system, that is to say that there is some an appearance randomly and without prediction of information appearing inside of that system. But in order for that to happen, there necessarily must be some predictability about the randomness that's occurring in the universe as a result of it appearing across some span of time or space that we can then, from an infinite perspective, analyze and understand as having some predictability about it. As a result of anything occurring in reality, there is necessarily some distribution or description about how it's appearing in reality, right? And even if we posit that something is appearing without previous precursor in reality, there is, so let's take the extreme example where we only have one piece of information appear in reality at a particular place at a particular time, right? But what we can say is that the information that describes this bit of information that appeared randomly, right, isn't actually random, right? We can describe the place and we can describe the time. And now we have information that is describing previously and from a higher perspective, the random piece of information that has appeared in our universe, right? And so it's not, so it's a contradiction, right? The information isn't randomly or without precursor appearing in the universe. There is a predictability about when and how it was going to appear in the universe. It's just that from the moment to moment kind of analysis of this moment, or of this space and time, we didn't know it was going to occur from any of the elements within it precursively, or is that a word, precursively? So any of the elements around, any of the information around this particular place and time couldn't have predicted this particular bit of information appearing here, but given that we have all the information about the universe, we know that at this particular place, at this particular time, this bit of information, or this range or set of information, is going to appear in this particular place at this particular time, right? And if we have more bits, right, let's say we have or not bits, but just like sets of information or pieces of information or information appearing in our universe, so let's say we have 2, then suddenly we have a data set of place-time variables that are describing when these pieces of information, and there's also like a content of the information, right? So there'd be content as well that is appearing. And then if we do this infinitely across the entire universe, but we just take every bit of information or every set of information, every piece of information that is arriving randomly or without precursor into our universe, there is still some, we can just say like an array or a matrix of information that is describing how these objects are appearing when and where and how, and with what context, right? And so from our infinite perspective of having all knowledge about the universe, there is there is still no undeterminability about when things or how things are occurring. From the human perspective, or from the capacity to interpret information and understand it from the object of the brain, which is a computational model which takes information and then provides a context and a perspective about the information it's processing through other information processing. We get a certain predictability or confidence in how things are occurring in our reality. And from the brain's perspective, which is limited and constrained to a particular space and time, and therefore not limitless in its ability to perceive or to understand knowledge, cannot predict many, if not all, I don't know if all, the vast majority of function in the universe. What I'm saying is that there's a human perspective about information, which is created through the acknowledgement data structure, or the existence acknowledgement content data structure. But the content of the brain does not provide us with the entirety of the acknowledgement of the universe that comes from the existence data structure that encapsulates all of the universe. But I don't know if this was convincing or not, but for me, it seems to make sense, where in order to have a mechanism that within some function creates some unpredictability, it means that we necessarily do not have information about that function, or which contradicts the hypothetical of us having all the information, or the information is appearing without precursor and randomly, or randomly is hard to use because there's no such thing as like a randomness, right? There's no, like, we can't describe what randomness is. It's really just a distribution of numbers, or not numbers, but a distribution of information at some particular rate across time or space. And so what we're saying is there is some distribution. Okay, so there's some distribution of random information appearing in our universe, but we can just, with our infinite knowledge about the universe, describe that distribution of random information appearing at some point in time, and therefore there is some predictability about it. There is some deterministic outcome of reality. But I mean, maybe that sounds like cheating because you're saying, you know, from the perspective of here, as a human brain, we could have never predicted this bit of information being here. But from the universe's perspective, we can predict it being there. And so, you know, I don't know, maybe some would say that this isn't deterministic because from the human perspective, we can't determine an outcome. But I just think that that's it seems like a very limiting way of looking at how the universe operates. But I don't know. Yeah, that's my kind of understanding on why determinism seems to be, or like existing in a deterministic reality makes the only sense to me. It doesn't seem to make any sense that we would live in undeterministic reality, because what that means is something that doesn't really exist. It's not possible. So in the exact same way that I consider this entire structure to be a singular thing, or one thing that requires all constituent parts that aren't actually separated as we think like geometrically, but are instead the same exact thing, we can similarly think that these three descriptions of information are just repeating exactly what information is, right? We're not increasing the scope of what we're actually describing here with information. Everything about information falls into these three categories, essentially, is what I'm saying.